What's up, True Crime World? You're here with Luminol on the Wall. I'm Becky.
And I'm Bevy. And today's case is about a young girl who was found brutally murdered on the banks of the Jordan River. And the details of this case would lead detectives on a winding path to find justice. This is the case of Annie Kasprzak. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Well, hello there to all our LOTW friends and family. And,
Yes, hi.
Hey, Bev, over there in your blue light glasses.
Which you love on me?
Yes, you're adorable.
They are large for my face.
It's the appeal, though.
It's the appeal.
My God, your glasses are so large. Don't you look cute? Oh.
Each to their own. I think I look a little ridiculous, but
Help your eyes,
Yeah, so I have to tell you a little bit of a story about my cat.
Yes.
Before we get into the case for today.
Let's hear about it.
All right. So my cats are senior. They're both 14 years old.
Yeah, they're getting up there.
They're pretty nimble, though.
Mm-hmm. Well,
After
one of
the
them
story, you will hear. Yeah, one of them is nimble, okay? Anyway, so Titan, he's my fat cat.
Yes.
Kush is my slender,
Agile
little guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I let my cats outside, but under my supervision.
Yeah, and they're good. Like, to be clear, they sit on your deck. Sometimes they just slowly
Eat grass.
Yeah.
And gander.
Yeah.
Within a couple feet of me.
They come when they're called. It's adorable.
It is rather adorable.
Yeah.
But on this day, Titan is on the pathway that is in my shared backyard.
Yes.
And he's rolling on the cement, loving his life.
Mm-hmm.
Kush is literally sitting beside Craig and I by the stairs of my deck. And in the distance, we see this young little boy and his teacup poodle going for a little stroll. And you can clearly see that this boy is trying to teach his little pup how to walk. He's
Aww.
kind of dragging him on a short leash.
Yeah.
Being adorable. And I'm thinking, Titan, he's a little scaredy cat. And they're walking on the path towards him, so I think he's going to book it back into the house, right?
Of course.
He doesn't. He sits up straight. And I'm like, that's a little sketchy, Titan.
He posturing?
Yeah, I'm like, what is going on? So I start walking towards Titan to pick him up off the sidewalk so this little boy and his little poodle can just keep on walking. And out of my periph, Becky, I see Kush low to the ground.
Oh my God.
Literally, you know how they do that low crawl?
Yeah, like when they're prowling.
When they're
hunting.
Hunting.
Oh my God.
And all of a sudden, he starts running in this low thing towards this poodle, Becky. Literally about to attack this poodle.
My God, Kush.
And I just abort my mission to grab Titan and immediately grab Kush off the ground. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. All of a sudden, Titan comes running inside. I throw Kush in the house. And this little poodle is terrified. Will not walk any further. The boy tries to drag him. No.
He's like, come on, poodle.
Yeah, and not only is the little dog scared, so is the boy, okay? He
just saw his life flash before his eyes because of your cat.
Exactly. As Kush was running towards him, he almost lifts this poodle by the the leash off the ground, trying to get away. Anyways, so the cat's inside. This poodle won't move. The boy's trying to drag him. Craig looks into our window. Kush is staring at this dog through the window.
What is wrong with Kush?
I know. And so the little boy eventually has to pick his poodle up and walk away.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What? Okay, and what's funny about this is this is not the first time Kush has done something like this to a dog.
Not the first time he's attacked a dog, that's for sure.
I mean, the one time I'm specifically thinking of, at least it was in your house.
Yeah.
And, he literally kind of bounded off the dog, but it scared her.
So Becky brought her dog and her friend's dog to my house because she was dog sitting.
Yes.
And Rocky is amazing with the cats.
Yeah,
he knows his place. Maisie was a little intrigued. Kush and Titan, each in their separate beds beside the fireplace. Maisie goes up to Titan. He sits up really quickly and hisses at her. And out of nowhere, Kush comes sprinting towards Maisie, jumps, and literally flies through the air and like sumo wrestles her to the ground. She starts...
Okay, that's a little extreme. Marcy's going to listen to this and be like, Becky, you made it seem like it was nothing, because it was. He like springboarded off of Maisie.
Well, I am taking creative liberties that Craig initially said when he talks about how proud he was of Kush. He's like, he grabs her by the back and like rolls off of her, but somehow drags her down like a wrestling move.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but like he did. He like flew through the air, jumped on her back, like attacked her, and she was like, yeah. And then, they dispersed, and poor Maisie sat on the couch shivering.
She was scared a little bit. But, no one got harmed.
No one got harmed in this event.
They learned their roles in the house.
Yes. But
and Marcy, to be clear, Kush just sprungboard off her back, and she got scared. Like I told you.
He attacked her.
He did not attack her. No one...
Becky was like, your cat needs to be controlled. And I was like, I'm low-key proud of my cat, because he was protecting his brother. And I think this situation outside was similar. Kush saw Titan being threatened by this dog. Threatened in quotations.
Do you think Kush sees Titan as incapable because he's larger?
And because he has trouble walking.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's like, don't hurt my brother.
I absolutely think that's what it is.
He is a little handicapped right now. He has some disability.
Yeah. Don't mess with him.
Don't mess with him. Maybe that's it. Maybe he's just being a really good brother. But in all circumstances,
he's a savage.
He's a savage, because the threat that was there were not threats. Like, no. Maisie calmly just walked, light sniff. Kush is like, hiya, mother effer, get away from my brother. And in this circumstance, he's just sitting on the sidewalk. And Kush again, hiya, get away, motherfucker. Exactly. That's what he's like. So your cat is unruly.
He's unruly.
He needs to be on a leash, Bev. He cannot be trusted any longer. He's proving that.
Yeah. I mean, now I know.
Your cat scared a boy.
Yes.
And a dog.
Yeah. I mean, granted, the poodle was almost as big as Kush, so maybe he just thought he could take him. I don't know. Either way, it was crazy. And I was like, I was on the phone actually at the time with Craig's parents, and we were like, It was crazy.
They probably left that conversation and be like,
what the heck just happened?
Do we need to check on them?
Yeah. Like, maybe. Seriously.
Yeah.
So either way, the boys were banned from being outside for a little while there.
Until you can behave, little guys.
Until they can behave. So that's that. So yeah, shall we get into the case?
Yeah, let's do it.
Which is no doubt going to be more savage than my cat attempting to attack a teacup poodle.
Yeah, thank God for your reaction, too.
Yeah,
good job, Bev.
Craig's out. He was like, whoa.
Whoa.
I'm impressed with my wife. Way to go, girl. She's so good. Look at her go.
Look at her reaction time.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Bev. Like you said, let's get into it.
All right. So Annie Kasprzak was born in 1997 in Utah into a tumultuous household marred by abuse. The instability of her early years led her to cycle through various child services centers and foster homes. In 2005, a new caseworker, Veronica Kasprzak, joined the Child and Family Services program and was assigned the task of finding a stable home for Annie. Do they literally have the same last name?
No. They end up having the same last name.
Ooh.
At the time, no, they did not, though.
Okay. Interesting that you would put that last name currently. What was her name prior, Becky?
I don't know.
All right. Well, anyways, they have the same last name, but are not actually related
yet.
But relation will happen later.
Yes.
Okay, so over the next few years, Veronica tirelessly sought a permanent home for Annie, arranging 9 different placements, only for each to end in disappointment. Annie's vibrant personality and the scars from her troubled childhood made her a challenge for many foster families. Her outspoken nature, combined with deep-seated trust issues, meant that she struggled to find a place where she felt truly accepted. Despite these challenges, Veronica and Annie formed a close bond. In January of 2007, Veronica and her husband Dennis decided to adopt Annie. There it is.
There it is.
Who was then 10 years old. Veronica was 6 months pregnant with her second child at the time. But Annie quickly embraced her new role as a loving big sister. She adored her new brothers and cherished her place in the Kasprzak family. Now, even with this new stability that Annie had found, her past life left her with a lingering sense of distrust. The pain of her early years made it difficult for her to believe in the love and support of her new family, which I have to say I totally get.
Yeah?
Because I feel like when you go through instability, feeling abandoned, it's hard to accept that the world would be any different going forward, even if you experience that new love and support, right? Totally. It would just be hard.
Yeah, you're probably just waiting for, like, the ball to drop.
Totally.
And, like, just wait till this segment in my life is over and maybe I'll have a new family after that or something, right?
Yeah. Despite the close bond, that trauma would definitely overshadow, I think, the new love, at least for a time.
Yeah, or it would make it difficult to, like, progress to that new family dynamic, right?
To that state of safety.
Yeah.
Right? If you're always felt like the world is a not safe place, full of instability, mistrust, all that, it's just hard to completely shift your worldview, especially when you're like 10 or 11.
And that's only really been your experience. So yeah.
So as Annie grew into her teenage years, her heart began to shine through. She excelled academically and aspired to become a therapist like Veronica. She even encouraged her parents to open their home to more girls from the foster system, hoping to extend the kindness that she had received. Aw, it just took a couple years.
Yeah. Warming up to each other.
Aw, how sweet.
Welcome to Spattered Podcast, where some stains never wash away. From the shadows of unsolved mysteries to the dark secrets that left more than just a trace, step into the world of crime and mystery where each drop, each spatter holds a clue. Follow us as we connect the dots, piecing together tales of betrayal and violence in a pursuit for justice. This isn't just another podcast. It's an unflinching deep dive into the evidence that others often fear to examine. Are you ready to see what lies beneath the viscous surface? Join me, Katie, your host, along with revolving co-hosts for Spattered, a true crime podcast. Because the truth is always in the blood.
Now, Annie's teenage years were marked by her infatuation with boys. I can relate. She either had a boyfriend or a crush, and her feelings were often reciprocated. Her vibrant social life was a stark contrast to the trauma of her past. However, the family stability was disrupted when Veronica decided to divorce Dennis and marry a man named James.
Husband.
Ooh, we know how divorce can be for young children.
Yeah.
This could take a turn for the worse. Hopefully not, but it could, as it does so often in families where they experience divorce, right? It could really threaten the safety that she is currently feeling.
It could, but read on Bevy and you will find out that it is only good.
Yay!
A good turn.
I was thinking Veronica and her bond is probably so special that it was just, a blip in the road and their bond just, prevailed through everything. Which, as you said, I'm sure that's what happens. Okay, so the family relocated to Riverton, a suburb of Salt Lake City, Utah. And James quickly became a beloved member of the family, and Annie, in particular, had him wrapped around her finger. He was fiercely devoted to her. On the evening of March 10th, 2012, Annie, now 15, was entrusted with looking after her younger brothers while Veronica and James went out for a Saturday date night. Upon their return, Veronica noticed that Annie had changed her outfit, now wearing jeans, but didn't think much of it. Feeling unwell, Veronica headed upstairs to take a shower while Annie retreated to her room to listen to music. When Veronica finished her shower, she discovered that Annie wasn't there. Concerned, James went to check Annie's room. Instead of finding her, he discovered a note hidden under her blanket. The note read, "I'm sorry, Mom. I made a mistake. I lied to you about a couple of things, and I'm sorry, but I have to leave. It's not you, it's me. By the time you read this note, I will be on my way to California. I lied to my friends. I told them I was pregnant, but I only wanted their sympathy. That's why I lied. I feel out of place here, and my only way out is to run away. Please don't try to look for me because I don't want to be found. I love you guys, but I have to. Bye." As soon as Veronica and James found the letter, they called the police to report she was missing or had run away. After getting off the phone with them, they reached out to Annie's on and off again boyfriend, Chris Bragshaw, who was 14 at the time. Chris told Veronica he didn't know where Annie was, but mentioned that she had told him she was running away with a guy named LJ. This confused Veronica, as the name was unfamiliar to her, and they reported all of this information to the police. James then decided to track Annie's phone using its GPS. The signal placed her within a mile of the Riverton Golf Course near a bridge that crosses the Jordan River, a popular area for horseback riders, joggers, and young couples at night. As James and Veronica watched the screen, the phone suddenly began moving rapidly, leading them to believe Annie had gotten into a car. Shortly after all the movement, the phone signal abruptly ended. Veronica drove to the last known location near a Walmart. She showed employees a picture of Annie and asked if anyone had seen her, but there was no luck. Disheartened, Veronica returned home, where she and James spent the night calling Annie's cell phone repeatedly, praying she would answer or walk through the door. They worried through the night. The following morning, on March 11th, a jogger running along the Jordan River called 911. He reported seeing large pools of blood by the path and closer to the river, unsure if it was from an animal, but what really alarmed him was a red shoe that was nearby. When police arrived to investigate, they realized the amount of blood was significant. So a forensic team was called in, and their presumptive test confirmed it was, in fact, human blood. Fearing the worst, detectives began to suspect that there was a body in the river somewhere. A helicopter patrol was dispatched to scan the area, and about a mile north of the blood, they spotted a body tangled among floating branches and debris. When the body was pulled from the water, it was clear the victim was female. There was a large gash on her forehead, and her face was swollen beyond recognition. Detective Derek Johnson, a young investigator, was assigned to the case. It was his first homicide, and the Draper Police Department hadn't seen a murder in years. Initially, the news outlets reported that the woman was of Asian descent and in her 20s. This information came just about 20 hours after Annie had gone missing, but Veronica and James initially thought the case was unrelated to the daughter because of the ethnicity that was reported, yeah. As investigators searched the area, they found the shoe the jogger had mentioned, and it matched the remaining shoe on the female victim. When this detail surfaced, Veronica and James began to worry. The shoes looked eerily similar to the ones James had just bought Annie for Valentine's Day a month before, so they called the police immediately. Now, all I have to say is, speaking to James and how devoted he was to her and how sweet he is, to buy red shoes for Valentine's Day, I'm sorry, that warms my heart.
What a cute dad.
Like, how sweet, right?
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, this is when things really take a turn in the investigation, because soon after Veronica and James had called the police, the female body was pulled from the Jordan River, and it was confirmed to be none other than Annie Kasprzak. Veronica and James were forthcoming and cooperative despite their immense grief. They shared with detectives that they had spoken to Annie's boyfriend, Chris. When detectives questioned him, Chris confirmed that Annie had told him she was running away with a man named LJ. Chris said he had spoken to LJ once, but nothing about his voice stood out, and he really didn't know the guy. Chris also provided an alibi for the night of Annie's disappearance, stating he was with his grandmother, though he had briefly left on foot to see a friend who wasn't home. At the time, he was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and a red hoodie, and Nike runners. Chris willingly handed over his shoes and clothing and provided detectives with a DNA sample. Later, Chris's father called detectives to inform them that LJ had driven past their house, threatening his son.
Which is weird, because LJ is supposed to be with Annie on their way to California.
Yes, exactly. It is odd, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if he's driving past Chris, Annie's ex-boyfriend, or on and off again boyfriend, is this spurred by jealousy of some sort? Because, like, what would the reason be other than that, right?
Yeah,
like
jealousy, or maybe he went to the cops, or spoke with the police,
or something, like...
It just kind of doesn't make sense, right?
Doesn't make sense.
And also, one thing, he didn't really know LJ.
Yeah. So how does LJ know where he lives? Like...
It all seems a little weird, right?
Yeah. And how does Chris's father know LJ? Like, how, you know what I mean? Like, how would they even know that that's who it was?
Yeah, I feel like the father probably is just like, what? Okay, I'll call the cops.
Yeah, but still, there's some pieces missing here, so we're going to have to get into that part of it in a little bit. Either way, after hearing this, detectives reached out to one of Annie and Chris's mutual friends, Spencer, who said he didn't know much about LJ, only that Annie had told him LJ was a part of a gang and had killed someone before, which made them all afraid of him. While Spencer was at the police station, Officer Jacqueline Moore, who was a close friend of Detective Johnson, noticed Spencer seemed to be displaying nervous behavior. His eyes widened and he clenched his fists as she passed by. She informed Detective Johnson of this observation, but despite her suspicion, the case seemed to be heading in a different direction based on the available information at the time. Now, when detectives searched Annie's room, they found a poem addressed to LJ, revealing that LJ stood for Leighton Gendon. Initially, the detectives were optimistic about having a name. However, when they searched for a person named Leighton Gendon, they hit a dead end. There was no social media presence, no driver's license, and no records in the gang database. It was as though this person did not exist.
Imagine what the detectives are thinking at that moment. It's like, we can't find him. Surely there must be record of him based on
somewhere, right?
What everyone is telling them. Even like a driver's license. Like, come on. Most people have identification of some sort.
Right. So I think the detectives must be wondering, like, is this a fake name? Does it stand for something else?
Right?
Like, yeah. So they got to figure it out, obviously.
Obviously.
Good luck, detectives. This is a head scratcher. Anyways, within a week of Annie's murder, police in a neighboring community arrested a woman named Joanna on fraud charges. Interesting that we would talk about that and then hear the word fraud. It's like, ooh,
who's the fraudster now?
Oh, is that a random happenstance or is that foreshadowing, Becky?
Well, I ain't saying shit, Bev.
You ain't saying shit.
Right? It'll ruin everything.
It was a rhetorical question.
Every time.
Every time. Oh my gosh. So anyways, the detectives at this time did an interview with Joanna. And during her interview, Joanna began talking about a young girl she had seen about a week earlier. And her description seemed to match Annie. Draper PD was immediately contacted, and Detective Johnson brought Joanna in for further questioning. Joanna told detectives she had seen the girl twice at a man's house named Daniel Ferry. Daniel was well known to law enforcement, involved in gang activities and drugs. Is it you, LJ? Is it you?
Bev, how do you think you get LJ out of Daniel Ferry?
I don't fucking know. I was just wondering. I was playing on this whole fraud impersonation, like LJ standing for something totally different, you know? You can at least see where my mind was going. No?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, fuck you,
You're
Becky.
probably gonna laugh in like, I don't know, like 30 seconds.
Yeah, okay, I feel like it wasn't. Oh. Yeah, could have read the next two sentences.
Oh, shit. Okay, carry on.
Okay, so Daniel, he's well known to law enforcement, involved in gang activities and drugs. Joanna explained that on the night of Annie's murder, the girl had shown up at Daniel's house with a guy named LJ. Whoops. The two went into the garage together, and Joanna assumed they were having sex. When they came back out, Daniel approached the girl and asked if she wanted to sleep with him. The girl laughed and said no.
Rejection.
But, like, really? Like, that was, like, an overt attempt of, like, I don't know, getting it in with a girl. Like, yeah, do you just want to go fuck? Like, I mean.
Very bold of him.
Very bold.
Very bold.
What's interesting, though, is even though it's, like, the most silly way to ask a girl, it's, like, he still becomes enraged at this rejection.
Yeah,
and
like
without warning, he slammed the girl's head against the wall so hard that she fell unconscious, leaving blood all over the carpet. Panicked, LJ and another man named V tried to calm Daniel down. Together, the three men carried the unconscious girl back into the garage and changed her clothes. Joanna recalled that they dressed her in red pants, a red and white shirt, and red shoes with white laces.
Like, how did they have a girl's outfit just waiting there for her?
Yeah, I don't
do this
know.
often? You do this often, Daniel?
Yeah, that's creepy.
Maybe he has a sister. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, weird, right?
Weird. So afterwards, they wrapped the girl in a blue tarp, placed her in a white Suburban, and left the house. When they returned, Daniel was covered in blood, but the girl was no longer with them. Joanna asked where the girl was, and Daniel coldly replied she went swimming, adding with a smirk that she put up one hell of a fight when they got there.
I mean, it sounds like Annie and Daniel probably met, right?
Yeah, it does sound like that.
Sounds like that. Sounds like that.
Becky. That was some interesting tonality in your voice there. if you guys haven't caught on, I have not read over this case.
This is truly her first time going through it.
We're going on an adventure together. And I'm really confused because I just thought this is Annie's murder. So let's keep going.
Yeah. Let's answer all the questions you and probably everyone else has right now.
That's right. So obviously at this point, detectives are optimistic with this lead, and they went to search Daniel's home. He wasn't there at the time, but a bunch of his family members were, making the detectives' job a little harder. When they got inside, they discovered that all of the carpet in the house had been ripped up, and there was a fresh coat of paint on the walls. However, they were able to find some spots that hadn't been covered well, and managed to collect swabs of suspicious blood-like stains. Detectives also searched the landfill for the carpet, finding a bunch of samples, which lucky, but ultimately they could not determine if any of them had come from Daniel's home. So that effort was a bust.
A bust.
A little after the search, they tracked down Daniel at an apartment complex. He was arrested and brought in for questioning. Daniel claimed he didn't know who Annie or LJ was. Detectives pressed him, showed him a picture of Annie, and told him that she was dead. He asked if her name was Brittany, but overall he seemed rather confused about what they were accusing him of, which was murder. Daniel asked for a lawyer at that point and told Detective Johnson he was wrong. Detective Johnson booked him for the murder of Annie. And in the meantime, detectives also learned that Daniel's gang nicknames were Joker and Lil Joe. Again with the LJ. But again, your tonality just moments before this seemed to throw me off a little bit. So seems like a couple just odd occurrences that are happening here. Anyways, at this time, Daniel was also being investigated in a nearby town for kidnapping and assault. So it seems like things are, in fact, like adding up. That's what it would seem. I have to add that caveat now. So anyways, when Veronica and James heard about this, they were absolutely confused. One, Daniel was in his 30s, but they were adamant that Annie was anti-drug, and they didn't understand why she would be hanging out with that crowd. Detective Johnson and his team really thought Daniel was their guy, until the DNA results came back from Daniel's house. It was determined that the samples weren't even blood, neither human nor any other bleed-able creature. What the fuck, Becky?
Bleedable. It auto-corrected it to bleed-able.
Yo, I like bleed-able. Nor any other bleed-able creature. Oh, God. Oh, that's
hilarious.
Good. I'm sorry, that's funny. Autocorrect sometimes just kills me.
I know.
So after this shocking revelation in the case, months went by with no new leads, and during that time, lead detective Johnson was promoted to sergeant, which meant his good friend and fellow police officer Jacqueline Moore was promoted to detective and was handed the Annie Kasprzak case. Which, if we remember, Jacqueline Moore was the person who felt that Spencer, Annie, and Chris's friend's behavior was suspicious.
Yes, that is the officer.
Now, everyone and their dog believed the case was going to go cold, but Detective Moore started from the beginning. She revisited the path to Daniel, but found that his phone record showed him way up north in Salt Lake County, far from Annie's home or the river. There was also no DNA linking Annie to Daniel's home. Additionally, when Daniel was re-interviewed, he maintained he did not know Annie and that she had never been at his home. On top of that, Daniel had pleaded guilty to the kidnapping and assault charge for another woman, which had happened on March 10th, just like Annie's. Detective Moore believed that this kidnapping was the crime Joanna had witnessed. At this point, Detective Moore felt confident that Daniel did not kill Annie. So she went back to the drawing board and started reviewing all of the other evidence. Through reading Annie's journal entries, Detective Moore realized that Annie was lost and only wanted to be loved. She noticed Chris's name was sketched all over Annie's notebooks.
I mean, we've all been there. I mean, she's in love.
Yeah, she's got that girl crush. Hate to admit it, but I got a heart rush, and it ain't slowing down. Just kidding. But anyways, yeah, she was in love with Chris. And just a month before she was killed, Annie had had sex for the first time with Chris. She had gone to her mom because she was scared. She was pregnant. So they took a pregnancy test, and fortunately, she was not with child, and her parents got her on birth control. Detective Moore got the impression that Annie originally thought she was pregnant, but when she wasn't, she made up the pregnancy story to keep Chris around because he didn't want to be with her.
Yeah, assumed a baby would keep a 14-year-old boy around.
Probably scare him, make him run for the hills, but 14-year-old logic.
Yep. We all do funny things.
That's right. Especially when we're in love.
Yes, yes.
Love makes you do crazy things.
Isn't that the understatement of everyone's life?
Yes. Especially when it comes to true crime stories.
Yes.
Yeah. So when Detective Moore diligently reviewed Chris and Annie's phone records, it appeared that they were fighting. There were 30-second calls that ended, followed by one trying to call the other back. Chris's number was blocked, and the cycle continued. Detective Moore also found a note in evidence from Chris's bedroom, which had been torn up and pieced back together. It appeared Chris had written out details about that evening with Annie, including what she was wearing.
On March 10th.
On March 10th?
Yep.
The day she went missing?
Mm-hmm.
Or quote-unquote ran away?
Yep.
Okay, so the note that was found in Chris's room mentioned that Annie was wearing a white jacket. Now, there was no jacket on Annie when she was found in the river. And when Detective Moore called Veronica to ask about it, Veronica said it had been missing since her daughter left and was murdered. This meant Chris had to have seen Annie that evening to know she was wearing that jacket. The note itself was titled AKD, and Detective Moore thought that this stood for Annie Kasprzak death. Initially, Chris wasn't seen as a suspect since he had no criminal history and was at his grandmother's house. And on top of that, Detective Moore was still trying to figure out who LJ was. So she made a house call to Annie's friend Jackson. He told detectives Annie had been telling her friends she was pregnant and said Annie would often refer to a guy named LJ.
Like, where is this? Like, how can there be so many LJs in the world? And coincidences, right?
No, I just had a light bulb moment, Becky.
Mm-hmm.
And the next line all but confirms it. I reread it. I pre-read it this time. One time, Jackson asked who LJ was, and Annie told him it was none other than Chris Bragshaw.
Just a code name for in her journals and shit?
Yes.
In case anyone read them, maybe?
Didn't want to maybe out Chris in all of this because she loved him.
Yeah.
So she made up a fake name for him to tell her friends that that's who got her pregnant. And now I am thinking back to the moment when Chris's dad called the police and said that LJ was threatening his son. Like, did Chris just tell his dad this to almost make LJ seem more like a real person other than himself? Do you know what I mean? Like, create this scenario to make LJ seem more realistic, even though
it didn't make sense.
It didn't make sense because he said he didn't know him, had never met him, and then how would he know that he's the one who's threatening him outside of his home, right? Like,
yeah,
that didn't make sense, but now it kind of does. It's like,
if he knows he's being referred to as LJ,
he needs to separate himself from LJ, right?
Yeah, and make LJ seem like a real person.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know. Imagine after all this time, she's probably standing there like jaw to the floor.
Jaw to the floor, yes.
Like, no effing way. Yeah. He's LJ the whole fucking time.
The whole time. Obviously, this is the first real good piece of information that she had received this far. And part of what made her realize that this was like good information was that when she looked back on a lot of the conversations that she had had with Annie and Chris's friends about the crime, she noticed that all of what they said about it was tainted by the news, and the news proclaiming Daniel as the prime suspect. And
as we know, he was cleared of that murder.
Yeah, like
right?
DNA evidence proved that he wasn't. So basically all of the like interviews that they had with her friends were basically like crap.
Yeah, they were virtually useless at that point.
Exactly. So the department released a statement clearing Daniel Ferry of the crime.
That's so smart because that means that if anyone continues to talk about him, they know, okay, maybe you're not the best person to talk to, but anyone that they get new information or other information not related to him, it's like, okay, we're going to follow that lead now.
Like real.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is smart. Clearing out the bullshit.
That's right. Clear it out.
Makes way for all the good info to come forward. Yeah, people will be like, well, I do remember this. And that had nothing to do with this person. So, you know what I mean? Like, they'll be like, maybe this piece of information is useful.
Totally.
Who knows? So, we're going to fast forward a little bit to September 1st of 2013. It was 6 a.m. Sergeant Derek Johnson was finishing his graveyard shift and heading back to the station. He noticed a car parked on the side of the road. He pulled over thinking someone needed help or was stranded. However, before he could even get out of his car, he was shot from the passenger side of the parked car, with the bullet hitting his shoulder. Derek drove off for safety, but lost control of his vehicle and crashed head-on into a tree. Sergeant Derek Johnson lost his life at the scene.
And obviously, this is like a really sad moment. One, he was the original investigating detective
on the case. Yeah.
Two, he's friends with Detective Moore, but also Bev, he at that point had kind of cleared his schedule up so that he was able to help Jacqueline Moore solve this case. So they were going to work together using his original knowledge and new stuff to hopefully find answers. So now Detective Moore has this huge disadvantage thinking she was going to have all this help, and now she's not. So she's flying solo.
Yeah.
And maybe anything that Detective Johnson, could have remembered from the original investigation, they have no access to that anymore.
Right. Because obviously he passed away. That's so sad.
Yeah, and it's a detriment to the case a little bit, unfortunately.
It is, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. So the case has kind of been sidelined with a tragic event.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, Annie Kasprzak has been dead for a year and a half, Becky. And Detective Moore felt that Chris Bragshaw had more to do with this case than anyone thought. But there was no evidence connecting him to the crime. So Detective Moore, she doesn't give up very easily, and she starts going through all of Chris's old interviews. In one, Chris told detectives that days before Annie's murder, he and Spencer had been hanging out when Annie showed up. During that time, Annie had gotten a nosebleed and a drop of blood had gotten on his shoelace. He wasn't sure which one. Detective Moore also remembered reading a text message Spencer had received from Chris after Annie had been killed. It said, "The cops might come back to your house. I need you to tell them that Annie got a bloody nose so I don't get blamed."
Yeah, now I'm sitting here thinking, like, air quotes, a bloody nose, Chris. Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Well, I have to, just notice that, psychopathy in Chris right now. Is psychopathy the right word? His psychopath behavior. Number one, as we've already mentioned, he created this, weird story of LJ, threatening him outside of his house to,
distract from him.
And then he came up with this, nosebleed story that had gone on his shoelace to somehow explain the presence of blood. He's going through a lot of measures to kind of, redirect the investigation, right? At such a young age, I feel like that's a little psychopathy.
I mean, I don't know what would, constitute a psychopathy, but it's fucked. He's only 14.
Yeah.
If I was, being accused of a crime, even if I did it, I don't know at 14 if I would have been able to be like, oh, yeah, she had a nosebleed. That's why there's blood on my shoe. No big deal.
Becky says, I don't know. I do know. Becky would bawl her effing face off.
I did it. I'm sorry. I did it. You put me through too much pressure. I did it.
You asked me one question.
Oh my God.
But yeah, he's a little bit of a psychopath.
A little bit.
And of course, when Chris's shoes were first tested for DNA, they found Annie's blood on the shoelace.
It does sound, because his shoe was tested right out the gate.
Right, of course.
And it almost is like, oh.
But there's an explanation for that.
She had a nosebleed? Okay, so there's going to be blood on your shoe. Cool. And just took it. It's like they took it for a little bit of face value.
I know, exactly. Isn't that so odd?
Yeah.
They probably just didn't think, this 14-year-old guy could be,
And I mean, the Daniel lead was very strong.
It was super compelling.
I can understand how, although they might have seen, oh yeah, there's blood, okay, but he explained it, okay, but Daniel, we have an eyewitness.
Yeah, no, totally.
It sounds way more intense, so I can see how that would get overshadowed.
I absolutely see it as well.
Yeah.
And while testing for blood, they found a couple of other matching droplets too on his shoe. And when Chris was questioned a second time about the blood drops, his story slightly changed. He said there were a couple of drops, not just on the shoelaces as he originally claimed.
I mean, it's minor.
And as Detective Moore went through the file, she realized that not all the droplets on the shoe had been tested, nor had the bottom of his shoe been examined. She decided to send it off to a private lab for further analysis. Now, this lab used a machine called MVAC, which could test for minute samples of DNA. They discovered that the bottom of Chris's shoe had been covered in blood at some point. However, they found 2 different male and female DNA profiles, making it a bust. But it was very suspicious that it had been covered in blood.
Especially considering there were pools of blood down by the river. Down by the river. You know?
Yes.
It's suspicious.
Where the watermelons grow. I thought you were about to give me like a serenade because I gave you one earlier and I was like, oh, I'm waiting for it. And then you said one sentence. I was like, oh, fuck this.
Well, it was a small serenade. Down by the river.
Yeah, where the watermelons grow. I don't know.
That's the bay, Bev.
Whatever,
down
Becky.
by the bay, where the watermelons grow. Not the river.
Well, you're not wrong.
Nope, I ain't wrong.
You ain't wrong, girl.
But to bring it back to the story, there was pools of blood. And if Chris had done that, he could have stood in blood. And like, what other moment are you going to be standing in that much blood?
No doubt.
That's the eerie thing.
So I'm guessing that these, because there was so many profiles also on the bottom of his shoe that like it was obviously enlightening to her, but it couldn't be used as like
specific profiles.
Yeah.
Like, was it Chris's DNA? Was it Annie's DNA?
Right.
No idea.
Some other person. So yeah, I can see why it is kind of a bust, but yeah, definitely enlightening.
Nonetheless.
Enlightening nonetheless. So Detective Moore also had Annie's left pant pocket tested for DNA. When she was pulled out of the river, her pocket was pulled inside out. Detective Moore hoped it was used by the suspect to pull her into the river. And lo and behold, the MVAC testing returned a male DNA profile. But there was a lot of sand and debris in the pocket, contaminants that made the results less accurate. They had to wait for a more precise DNA kit from the FBI that could work around all the debris to get an accurate comparison. They waited months for this kit. Unfortunately, when the lab finally called Detective Moore, they informed her that there were too many contaminants in the sample and they could not get a profile.
Which, obviously, Detective Moore is, like, hella confused because it's like, we waited months for this kit that's supposed to remove those contaminants.
Right.
What the F happened?
Yeah. Well, it was eventually learned that the private lab had made a huge mistake. They hadn't used the FBI kit. And now the DNA pocket sample was ruined and could not be used for further testing. Like, they had one job.
You had one job.
Like, a young girl's, like, homicide rests in the balance, you bitches.
I know. It's pretty disheartening, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, okay, when I watched an interview with Detective Moore, she said what was even more disheartening is it's not like it was just like, oh, you couldn't get a sample. Okay, let's wait for this kit. And they never speak again. And then the kit comes in and something goes awry. She had been in contact. She had been in contact. They had meetings, made sure everyone was on the same page. And then still someone fucked it up.
So someone's fucking fired.
Probably like, this is what we do. They hire private
lab techs.
Lab techs or whatever. Yeah. They hire private companies so that they can have these things taken care of. And yeah, we just, messed up our job bit.
Yeah.
Someone's not getting a Christmas bonus.
That's right. They dropped the ball, and obviously this is a significant blow to the case.
Absolutely.
Annie has been dead for 2 years at this point, and this was the last piece of evidence that they had. However, Detective Moore, kudos to this lady, despite this setback, and honestly, many others.
Yes.
She was determined not to let the case go cold. She went back to the drawing board and revisited Chris's cell phone records. She decided to take a week-long course on cell phone investigation taught by a former homicide detective. Talk about someone doing their job right. In stark contrast to someone just fucking it all up.
Exactly.
Man.
If I ever get murdered, I want her on my case.
Yeah.
Can you please, call her and be like, hey.
Oh, I will, Becky.
Can you come to Canada?
I will not rest.
I know you won't.
Until I got Jacqueline Moore. So after the course, she enlisted the help of the instructor, Cy Ray, who now ran a company specializing in cell phone investigations. Cy agreed to help pro bono, bless his heart. He reviewed 35,000 of Chris Bagshaw's calls and texts, and one incoming call stood out. It came in at 9:01 p.m., lasted for about 1 minute and 59 seconds on the night that Annie died. During this call, Cy observed what are called hand-off signals between cell towers, and there were 25 hand-offs between 4 towers, indicating that the area Chris's phone was in had poor signal. Based on these handoffs, they were able to narrow down the location of Chris's phone to about a 12.5-mile radius at 9:01 p.m. on March 10th, 2012. So what I'm guessing, Becky, is like the handoffs is like the signal, it's poor quality, so it doesn't fully reach this one. So the signal then, like, that tower bounces off to hands the signal off to another more competent tower, and then bounces off another one to another more competent tower to try and get like a full signal, right?
Yeah, it just keeps like going back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so when it's bouncing off a couple different towers, you kind of get an area in which he was located in, right?
Yeah, because they can only reach so far a signal, right?
Exactly.
So they know because of these 4 towers, he has to be within this radius somewhere.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I guess the next step was to pinpoint a more precise location within that radius.
Mm-hmm.
So they used high-tech scanning equipment, and they found only one location in town that produced the same handoffs. It was at the Jordan River near the bridge, the exact area where Annie was killed. What's interesting is that the geography of the river created a valley, making it hard to get a strong signal from one tower which matched the rapid handoffs. Detective Moore and Veronica realized this was also what they had seen in real time when tracking Annie's phone on March 10th.
Yeah, so the whole time they thought Annie was traveling in a car.
Right.
But it was just the rapid handoffs between all the cell towers that made it seem like she was
Rapidly moving,
yeah. I mean, Obviously, how were her parents supposed to know?
No, God, no.
But
now I didn't even know what handoffs were before this.
No, me either. And so now that we know Chris's phone did the exact same thing, and now Annie's.
Oh, yeah. This is, it's painting a dark picture of Chris, right?
Yes, it is.
What's even more interesting is that the morning before Annie was killed, she had told her mom that Chris asked her what she would do if he asked her to run away with him. Veronica had told her daughter that if she went missing, Chris would be the first one she would call. On March 10th, after they found Annie's note, Veronica called Chris at 9:01 p.m. That call contributed to the handoffs, placing him at the scene of the crime around the same time Annie was murdered. Whoa.
So imagine if they had not had that conversation in the morning.
Right.
Veronica maybe would not have called Chris.
That's right.
And they potentially could have never placed him in that exact same spot.
Dang.
So out of everything, it was Veronica's one call that is giving them almost their like last shred of evidence.
For this crime. Yeah. That is miraculous, honestly. So on October 16th, 2014, more than 2.5 years after Annie's death, Veronica received a call from Detective Jacqueline Moore. She was in Grand Junction, Colorado, where they were arresting Chris. He was 17 at the time and living with his mom. Undercover officers arrested him while he was on his way to school, and he was brought in for questioning. Chris was then extradited back to Utah, where he requested a lawyer and was informed he was being arrested for the murder of Annie Kasprzak, as well as an obstruction of justice. He pleaded not guilty. However, 1 week before the trial was set to begin, Detective Moore received a surprising call. On February 29, 2016, Chris's attorney had scheduled a change of plea hearing. Detective Moore rushed there and barely made it in time. Chris pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Now, a couple of months prior, police had learned that Chris had confessed to his crime to another inmate. He told them that Annie had said she was pregnant, and while they were on the phone discussing their options, Chris told Annie that they could run away together. Chris admitted to the inmate that he didn't think she was pregnant, and when they met at the bridge, he started beating her with a shovel until she died. During sentencing, Chris seemed somewhat remorseful for his crime in his statement. Chris Bragshaw was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison and will be eligible for parole when he is 37 years old.
Wow. That was a roller coaster of emotions. Hey, Beth?
Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
this like case really was shocking.
For so many reasons.
Number one, like if he didn't think that she was pregnant, why kill her?
Why kill her? Like just in the odd chance she was?
Yeah.
Are you just a rage monster?
Yeah. But it's so interesting, right? Like Annie thought by telling him that she might keep him. Yeah. But as we said, it makes him like fearful, scared, and murdery.
Yeah. I know. Opposite of what she wanted.
Opposite of what she wanted.
I know.
And obviously she was with someone who was a little bit of a psychopath. So
yeah, most people don't choose to kill people.
Yeah. So especially over something like that. So yeah, that was a crazy case. And may Annie rest in peace. I really feel as though she did not deserve any of this.
No.
I wanted her to have a chance at life and love.
Yeah, she seemed like a genuinely kind soul and on the right path.
So may she rest in peace. And thank you to Veronica for being a great freaking mom.
Yeah.
And thank you to Jacqueline Moore because you were a freaking stand-up detective.
Yeah. You're freaking determined.
That's right.
And we love to hear that. Love it.
So Becky, this is the case of Annie Kasprzak. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.
And just your weekly reminder to download our weekly episodes, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, and give us a follow on our social medias. You can find us at Luminol on the Wall. Can't wait till next week.